Good morning. It is January 29th, and this is Safer Country and our conversation with Andy Goddard, the Legislative Director of the Virginia Center for Public Safety. Andy is our expert on gun laws that are moving through the legislature in this session, and in past sessions, he's a leading advocate. And here he is now to join us. Hi, Andy. Good morning. Good day. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just literally just got out of the Zoom call with the committee.
Outstanding. I know you're right on the case. We want to just start by welcoming everyone and giving them a little heads up that they can get more information about Andy at facebook.com/safercountry, our Facebook site. You can see past conversations with Andy about what's been going on in Richmond at our website, safercountry.org/media. And just as a reminder, my name is Paul Friedman. I'm the founder and executive director of Safer Country, a gun violence prevention nonprofit focused on keeping guns out of unsafe hands. And there are quite a few unsafe hands, and this has been a wild month of January. I think we all share in the stunned amazement about what has happened in the space of a short month. We have gone from an insurrection at our Capitol to an inauguration, which was remarkable, under the guard of the National Guard in our capital city. We've moved on to an impeachment, which included the support of, surprisingly, one of the Republican House members in leadership, as well as a total of 10 members of the House of Representatives who are Republican. We have watched people be arrested around the country for having weapons and negative intentions towards our government and many of our leading legislators or our new president. And this has been a shocking time. And on top of that, we've had some other remarkable things going on. A Texas court has approved the continued opportunity for family members who sued Alex Jones to continue their lawsuit because of his claim that Sandy Hook and Parkland were hoaxes and staged, and we're thrilled about that. And now we have a member of Congress reiterating those very same claims and being called upon by a broad swath of the public to be expelled from Congress. At the same time, we've had members of Congress attempt to get on the floor with guns. This is a stunning month. And while we're doing all of that, we're looking at trying to improve the gun laws in Richmond and in the state of Virginia. And with that in mind, I should actually wanted to add one more thought. There's major national debate about the filibuster. And of course, if we can't pass laws on the federal level, we're not going to get new gun laws passed on the federal level that can make our country safer. So there's that war going on as well. So, but putting that aside for a moment, we're going to go back in. This is a stunning month, and now we're going to go back into what's happening in Richmond. And lots of things are happening in Richmond. Some incredible laws are moving through the process. And some of the ones we were most concerned about have been blocked. So Andy, bring us up to date. What exciting things have you been following? Where do we stand right now?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, just before we go into that, I think we'd also need to remember one thing that happened a couple of days ago. It was a horrifying shooting of a family by the 17-year-old son, the father, the mother, an older brother, his pregnant girlfriend, a younger sister, and the shooting they were all killed, and the shooting and the injury of a younger brother. And it was done with a machine pistol. which is basically an assault rifle with no stock. Horrifying example of what devastation can happen in a very short time when the gun's in the wrong hands.
And we're seeing a continued level of shooting of individuals and of groups of people in this country at a level that's unfathomable, really. That is one story, but it is one of numerous stories that we have to put a stop to this, and that's why we're here today. And we thank everyone for, if you can tune in, or if you're watching this after the fact on a recording, I hope you'll take the time to watch the whole show and catch up on what's happening in Richmond, and then take action. Contact Andy. He'll provide in the chat room how to reach him so you can help to express your views on these laws as they are moving through the process. Everyone makes a difference by having their voice heard. All right, Andy.
Well, on the good news side, we had listed on our support list 13 bills. And as of a few minutes ago, all 13 of those have now passed committee. And we anticipate that they will, each of them, have a reasonable hearing, at least on the House floor, which at one time we would be doing cartwheels if we got one bill through to the House floor.
Well, of course,
even if it was killed on the House floor.
Right. A couple of sessions ago, we couldn't even get a bill introduced into a committee. In fact, they had a 90-minute session that lasted 90 seconds, if I recall.
In the special session, yes. Wasn't very special.
Yeah.
And the good news also is that we had, I think it was 7 bills on our opposed list. And as we stand today, 5 of those have already been killed. And the remaining 2 appear to be dying through neglect, as they've been put into committee, but have not been called forward onto a docket yet. I believe it's their intention of the committees to leave them to wither away, as they say, on the vine. So a tremendous year so far, even if we don't go any further than this, but I anticipate that a lot of those 13 bills will make it through the whole process. Now, their condition when they reach the end may be slightly different to how they started. In a couple of cases, we have 2 very important attempts to get improvements, which were done in the House and the Senate. And each of those bills had different technical content, the different definitions. Let's start off with trying to keep guns from the hands of people who've been judged to have committed assault and battery on a family member. Those 2 bills, what the Senate bill cleaved very closely to the federal prohibition, which already exists, and it would basically allow Virginia's police forces to implement and to enforce that without having to get the feds to come down to Richmond or down to Virginia to enforce federal law. So it's a mirror of federal law.
The number of that bill?
The Senate version was, where are we? That would have been Barbara Favola's Senate Bill 1382. And that one got through Senate Judiciary by a vote of 8-5. It's now gone to Finance. We hope that it will get through Finance because actually I don't think it should have gone there in the first place, because the penalty is actually a 3rd grade misdemeanor, which does not involve jail time. And usually if a jail time is not involved in a bill, then they don't usually have no fiscal impact, which means they don't necessarily have to go to appropriations. However, there's been some talk about how the police would handle this, and so maybe that's what they're going to talk about. I anticipate that it should get through scrutiny and get onto the floor, where I hope it will pass. The counterpart to that is Kathleen Murphy's bill, HB 1992, which had a broader definition of families. It had family members. It also had stiffer penalty. and that has been modified somewhat. And my idea, my impression is that each of those bills will go to the other house after crossover, and each of those places will conform their bill, or the new bill they're looking at, to the bill that left their house. In other words, they'll switch over. And then, of course, if that's still the case and they haven't, nobody has conformed one of their bills to the other bill, then they'll go to a committee of conference, and that's when all the details will be ironed out. And then each place will get to vote on it again. And if they come to an agreement, then it will go to the governor. I think it's a very important bill, because right now it's federal law that these people are not allowed to have a firearm, not allowed to possess it, not allowed to purchase it, not allowed to transport it. And yet the federal government is kind of limited in their resources for enforcing that law. And right now, Virginia State Police or any of our other police agencies have no right to enforce that law, because it's only federal. So if we can mirror that federal law as closely as possible and get it into the Code of Virginia, we can start taking guns away from people who are proven to be dangerous. Because if you can attack your family member, you can attack anybody.
Absolutely.
The other bill, which I think is very important, is the two versions of it are Senator Ebbins' 1381 and Senator Levine's 2081. These would prohibit firearms in government buildings. This is basically codifying what Governor McAuliffe put in as an executive order a few years ago, but would extend the firearms prohibition to the Capitol grounds. Now, there's some differences in definitions there about the extent of the Capitol grounds, whether it encompasses sidewalks and streets nearby. But the biggest problem that seems to be getting the most pushback is that it not only prevents firearms, but it also prevents stun weapons. Now, I think it was a good thing to include that at the beginning. I don't know whether the stun weapons are going to be in the bill at the end, because there's so much pushback from people saying that Richmond is so dangerous that if you walk outside of the Capitol building or outside of the General Assembly building, then female staffers and female delegates and senators and family members are at risk of being killed instantly unless they have something in their pocket to defend themselves. I think it's kind of nonsensical. And I think that the idea of that a lot of people are currently carrying stun weapons, I think if we were to find out that information, I think you would find that if they're not currently carrying them now, why would they be so upset about not being able to carry them in the future? But if we have to get rid of stun weapons to get the bill, get the votes to pass the bill, after all, firearms are the biggest threat. Stun weapons, you don't use a stun weapon to kill a lot of people in a very short time. You use a firearm. So
have you heard from the legislators, particularly Mark Levine, I guess, as to whether he has a view about compromising on that point? I heard from him last night. I didn't get a clear answer.
Yeah, I was conversing with him last night too, and I believe he's open to the idea of, because the primary objective is to keep the firearms off of Capitol Square. Let's have a place where people can express their opinions in peace without having to deal with armed individuals. And I still cleave to the idea that if you walk into the Capitol grounds carrying an AR-15 with a huge magazine on it, and you're wearing a helmet and you're wearing camouflage and insignia of these fake militias, I don't think you're intending to be peaceful. Now, you might not be intending to carry out violence per se, but you're definitely intending to carry out intimidation. And that, in my book, is not peaceful.
Absolutely. Well, let's hope that moves through. And it sounds like there is a path forward for it. So that's good.
Yeah, I believe so. And I think they're both very necessary, and they would both provide great improvements to the current situation.
Where does Mark's bill on on polling places and vote counting centers stand?
That is passed, and it will be going over to the Senate. There are actually not that many bills which have counterparts. So the Senate will be looking at, I think it's 7 bills from the House, which they have not seen before. That they haven't seen a Senate version of them. So there will be new bills to them, new bills in the sense that they maybe have been put there in previous years, but they haven't heard them again this year yet. So it'll be very interesting when we get to Senate Judiciary to be able to offer opinions on each of those good bills.
Yeah, let's take a moment and just talk about that for a second. You're obviously paying close attention. We have had fortunately, a number of outstanding advocates appear at these committee hearings to speak up for these bills, from groups like Grady in Everytown, Moms, the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence, Handgun Violence. Can you share a little bit about your experience with that team and how they're operating and who's showing up at these Zoom committee meetings?
Well, yeah, it's nice to see Brady having a spokesperson. It's nice to see all those other organizations. I coordinate closely with the coalition and their representative Laurie Haas, obviously. I in some ways wish that we could still have better communication between our groups prior to the testimony, just in case somebody's seen something that we haven't spotted, or the vice versa, because it can be very detrimental if somebody steps up there and makes a mistake with the bill. It hasn't happened on our side. It's happened definitely on the other side, where people have stepped up and said things which I know that if they talked with the other people who are going to speak in that manner, they would have said, please don't say that.
Can you give us any examples? That would be fun.
Well, yeah, people speaking to the wrong content it happened a couple of times. People started to get very passionate about what the bill would or wouldn't do in opposition to the bill, but we're talking about an entirely wrong bill.
Well, these bills are often discussed at 7 in the morning, right? So people have to wake up.
It's some people needed an extra cup of coffee, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you think has there been talk at all among our side to have a coordinating meeting?
Well, we used to say we had a sort of a loose, how would you put it, committee or what have you of people who are going to testify. I think we need to get back to that in some way. I'd like the people who are representing the big agencies to offer to discuss a little bit with those of us on the ground here in Richmond. Not I'm not looking to get any inside information or how they intend to deal with something, but I think we do need to join our voices together in a more unified way. I mean, I haven't heard anything said that I wouldn't have been happy to say myself, but it could happen. It could happen, and I may have said something they don't like.
Well, that's it,
which I think is the most likely thing.
They're a very congenial group, and I think everyone has enormous respect for the people like Laurie Haas, who are leaders in these efforts. I would think that Laurie would have some. You're in touch with her, and does she?
Continuously, yeah. Laurie is getting
this sort of insight from these other groups as to what they're doing, or is that something that she's not getting either?
I would imagine she's getting better connections with the people than I am. Because of all of the speakers at these events, I think she's the most clued in, not just on the policy, but also on the underlying politics and the finer details of what's been discussed and what's likely to be happening. So she definitely outranks everybody else on that.
Well, one of the bills we've spoken about in the past, and I think it was a great concern to us, was the bill, well, actually two bills, one with regard to hunting on Sundays, and the other which would allow AR-15s to be used for hunting. Do we have an update on those bills?
Well, one of the strange things, yes, with the hunting on Sundays on public lands failed to report in Agriculture, Chesapeake and Natural Resources by a vote of 6-16, which I think is a very, very important number, because that's not, there's nothing like party lines.
You think that relates to the fact
clear,
that
a
Sunday
clear
is
indication?
Does that relate to the fact that Sunday is still considered to be a day of rest?
I think there might have been a number of different motivations. I think that would be one from people who believe, very passionately about the religious aspect of it. But I think also the idea that public land is open to hunting 6 days a week, which could make it difficult for people to use that public land if they were not hunting, because we see every year people mistake two-legged animals for four-legged animals. So I think it was a mix of not wanting to have the risk to the general public and not wanting to close the public lands to the public effectively on a Sunday. There should be at least one day in the week during the hunting season that people can use that for trail riding or whatever they want to, walking or bird watching or what have you, without the feeling that they might end up getting shot.
That would be nice.
Yes, it would be nice.
So what about the AR-15?
The AR-15 one, a strange thing has happened with a number of the Senate bills. And I hasten to think a little bit quickly about how I'm going to put this, but bills going through Senate Judiciary have been dealt with in a very haphazard way. Let's put it that way. I'm trying to be kind here.
Who shares that?
I have on my list 4 bills, 3 bills rather, from the Senate that I don't know where they are. I don't know what's going on with them. And the hunting with an assault rifle is one of those bills. It was referred, it was put onto a docket, I think twice, was not heard. I don't know if that is what we call a pocket veto, which is that they decide that this is too controversial, we won't hear it. We don't want to put people on the record as having voted yay or nay on this. I don't know. Or if it's just slipped through the cracks and on Monday they're going to say, oh, and we found these bills which haven't been finished yet. That could happen.
Has that happened in the past?
It has, yes. And I think I don't want to get anybody into trouble here, but I think it really depends on how organized the chair is.
And the chair is again?
John Edwards, Senator Edwards.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful guy, great guy, but it's about organized as a train wreck.
Well, there's some insight for the public.
So Monday morning, we may see these phantom bills that are sort of lingering around in the ether appear on the docket. So it's not all over until next Friday, which is crossover. So there's plenty of time for them to, actually there's plenty of time for many bills to be even resurrected. It's never been, Lazarus is not confined to the Bible. We've had bills which are totally dead, which have suddenly reanimated themselves and gone back for a different consideration. So I'm not going to put that past them until the crossover is announced. Anything can happen.
All right, so let me jump you over to something else. You sent a bulletin out this morning, just before our gathering here, on 3 bills on the VA CPS listing that were voted on in the public safety this morning.
Yeah.
You importantly shared those with us online. HB 2295 by Simons to create a substantial risk order registry. Can you want to talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, this, we just put in last session the creation of a substantial risk protective order, and we have been very concerned about how it's being implemented and where it's being implemented and where it's not. If we put this on the books and nobody's using it, that would be terrible. If we put it on the books and people are misusing it and using it in places such as overly using it for mental health, which of course already has its own temporary detention order system, or if they're using it mostly against people of one particular ethnicity or what have you, it's important that we gather that kind of information on the implementation. And then if there seems to be bias or there seems to be some other problem which is not, causing it to be an equitable or effective measure, then that can go back to the Assembly for them to tweak the bill and put in improvements and make sure that everybody's using this thing to the best of its intentions, and it's being fair to those it's being used against. We don't want this to be picking on any particular ethnicity or any particular group.
Right.
It's out there as a tool, and it will save lives.
Right.
But it has to be used, and it has to be used properly.
That the bill reported out at 14-8, you noted. And
yeah.
What do you think the prospects of this bill in the Senate are?
I think that it's since it's information which would be useful to researchers and possibly to the public. It certainly would be useful to advocates, and it is non-identifiable information. This is not a list of the cases which arose from this or the people who were involved. This is a numerical analysis of how it applies to which groups and who's using it in which geographic areas. So I don't think that there should be much of pushback in the Senate to this bill.
Now, has there been an effort made to stay on this subject? Because this bill, as we've talked about this before in other sessions, it's really a very important law, but it's a unique law in the respect that so many laws are enforced by law enforcement, and that's the extent of the law. Someone commits a crime, it's discovered, law enforcement has to arrest somebody potentially, and then they're potentially prosecuted and may pay a penalty or of some sort. But in this particular case, the most effective ways for this law to be carried out is for people to come forward and provide information to law enforcement, whether it's to the police or sheriff or Commonwealth's attorney, about the need for officers to intervene and potentially get this risk order initiated. But that requires public awareness.
It does, and
what kind of effort are we making from our universe to get the funds and to motivate our government to have a public awareness campaign about this law?
That's a really good point, and I don't think we're probably doing enough. I think amongst the Commonwealth's attorneys and other people like that, the information's going to go out there, and that they will know it's available. But this really, as you said, is really a tool for the public. It's a tool for them to use. The tool is actually implemented and used by the police, but the instigation of it is from the public. And this is, one of the most important. I just read a horrible report about mothers who had called the police, 911 calls directly to the police to get them to come and help with someone who was in crisis. And in 8 cases that I read, the police arrived and promptly killed the person, which wasn't, I'm sure, the kind of help that the mothers were asking for. So, the people need to know about it. They need to know it's available, and they need to know that it's safe, that it is a safety measure for their person in crisis, not a method to get them executed.
I think it's important to ask, what race were the people involved in that story you just described?
A variety.
So,
a variety. But yeah, it wasn't just a black and white issue. This was there were a number of Caucasian males who were in crisis, and they suffered the same fate.
So people are getting killed by the police when they show up because they're whether they're white or black in these instances?
Well, and also, yeah, to say something on behalf of the police, turning up for a situation like that, they don't know what they're going to expect. They don't know what to expect, and they can be concerned about their own safety to the extent that they feel they have to act decisively, which brings us to another bill which came up about the use of deadly force. There was an attempt this year to get the criteria for the use of deadly force taken out of one section of the code and put into the after event analysis. Well, the criteria for using deadly force should be the criteria that are taught to the police, so that they use that criteria before they shoot. It's one thing to tell somebody, this is how we expect you to act, or you don't tell them that, and then you say, well, this is how we're going to analyze what you did after you did it, when somebody's already dead. Luckily, we got that bill killed.
That's great. Do you think we need special training for law enforcement that is going to attempt to intervene for a risk protection order? This is a situation where someone is calling to prevent a problem, not create one. And no crime has yet been committed. Do we need police to be retrained for this kind of intervention?
I think it needs to be part of this training program that's already underway, which is the de-escalation type of training, where police are being taught alternative methods to de-escalate situations, rather than going in and decisively acting to end them, but actually looking for options to, especially when the person who's being called in is having behavioral or mental health problems. So yeah, I think the vehicle is already there, and the police have started getting this training. Quite a lot of, as I understand, a lot of people. I'm going to get the training myself when I can find one that's available, because I think you can, just to see how it is. But I think it's already out there, and our police need continuing education type training on de-escalation. Because
well, let me bring up a related point and maybe take it back to the federal level a little bit. We're all aware that there's a member of Congress. Her name is Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, who is, without a doubt, someone who lives on a different plane of existence. And let me speak from quoting Fred Gutenberg, who lost his daughter in Parkland. He called her, I believe, deranged, and wants her. There's a movement by a member of Congress to get her expelled. But Fred also noted that in Florida, the video we've all seen of her, one of them is when she attacks David Hogg as he was lobbying on Capitol Hill, and screams at him on camera as he attempts to evade her. And she calls out his support for red flag laws, which relates us to what we're talking about here. And Fred pointed out that if she lived in Florida, given her public description of the fact that she's armed, and given her erratic behavior and statements, she might qualify as someone who could have an intervention. How do you feel about it?
I think somebody does need to give some sort of an intervention in Congress, to be honest with you. Or perhaps we could aim those Jewish space lasers at her.
Well,
don't you have an app on your phone for that?
Yeah, an intervention to remove her gun would be encouraging. But yeah, she's seeing space. I don't know. Stephen Colbert described it last night as lightning, that she could not grasp that there's lightning in the sky. But she can't. Who knows what she's thinking? But we need to get rid of it. The fact that she, the irony, of course, is that she both called, whether it's Parkland or Sandy Hook, a hoax, and at the same time she called it staged and a false flag operation. Well, you really can't have it. It either happened and it was provoked by people she doesn't like, or didn't happen. I mean, it's hard to hold both in your hands at the same time, but she's managed to do it.
Logic isn't always used in these arguments, I'm afraid.
No, it's quite frustrating and it's upsetting. And I know it's a serious matter to the families, in particular the families who went through those experiences.
Oh, I can hold, because my son has been described on many places as being a crisis actor. He was not shot. He just went to the hospital and got the hospital to agree to let him have a bed, and pretend to be, pretend to need all these pipes put into his body and things connected up. So I have great sympathy for victims' families who are being accused of being crisis actors.
How many operations has your son gone through so far?
He had a very serious operation immediately after the shooting, and he's had two small ones. Well, no, he's had one small one and then another quite serious equivalent of a hip replacement operation since. And he's still got problems with the lead. So future operations are not out of the question. And to think that, all that is somehow manufactured and fake,
It's despicable.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered, I just take this personally for a moment, have you ever considered, or has he ever considered a lawsuit against the people who've made these claims?
Not really. I think in some ways, it's all online stuff. I think that there ought to be a mechanism by which you could, if you are the victim of something, such as the father and mother of the journalists that were killed in Roanoke, that if you're the victim of some horrible thing like this, and there is stuff online which is either horrific, showing the death of that journalist, or things that for your family is just does not want to be online, there should be some mechanism to appeal to get it removed from the online presence of some of this stuff just gets to feed into people's fetid imaginations, and it doesn't need to be there. That sort of information does not need to be repeated.
As I recall, many entreaties were made to Google and to Facebook and to try to get them, I guess among others, but they're the leaders, to address that issue. And in the past, they've been reluctant, but we've seen now a change in these companies. We've seen the way they have kicked off and excluded, our former White House resident, Donald Trump, and some other people, Rudy Giuliani, I believe there's been a temporary suspension of the leader of Iran. There's a new wave here and a new attitude. I'm wondering if we can't, there might be an effort with those companies to see if they might have a different point of view now.
As long as it's not, sort of an outright censorship based upon, no some sort of arbitrary decision. If it's some sort of ethical standards are being established and then policed, I think that would be the answer to it.
Well, we have to be aware, and I'm a lawyer. I can tell you, censorship is something only the government can do legally. The First Amendment applies to government law. It doesn't apply to private actors. And these are private companies, which gives them the power to kick people off, like Donald Trump. But they are using, or attempting to use, we believe, fact-based arguments for why they should put warnings and remove people if they continue to post non-factual and potentially dangerous information, such as the fact that
insightful, anything that incites, violence or perpetuates these conspiracy theories that have no basis in fact. I mean, put your facts up. Put your facts up on there as well to show why what you say is the way it is. Without the facts, or just coming up with something that you had some sort of horrible dream last night, and putting it on Facebook as being the truth, that shouldn't be there.
No, and people do take this stuff online seriously, or some people do. And if they're inclined to be violent and they think the only way to resolve a problem, like the person who went to Comet Ping Pong Pizza
Oh, yes, yes,
and
yes.
shot it up, or we've seen other people have been, look, they brought weapons to the Capitol and they invaded the Capitol because of a lie that we know that. And so they've been brainwashed and other people are easily influenced.
Yeah.
And we've seen that in the case of the death threats against some of the family members in the Sandy Hook and Parkland situation, which is what led to this lawsuit against Alex Jones. But let's move on.
Yeah.
We've got some other bills to talk about. We've got 20 minutes left.
Yeah.
Once again, very happy to have you, Andy Goddard, Legislative Director of the Virginia Center for Public Safety. Of course, I'm Paul Friedman, Executive Director of Safer Country. And we're thrilled that you guys are watching, tuning into this, and sticking with us for this conversation. Every one of them, I think, have been enlightening. All right, on we go. Let's talk about HB 2319 put out by Elizabeth Guzman.
Yes.
Require gun owners who cohabit. Did we talk about that earlier?
No, that's an interesting bill. It is, I think, a very important thing to realize that if you are living with someone who is not who is prohibited from possessing a firearm, and you have a firearm, it's your duty, it's your responsibility to ensure that that person who's prohibited doesn't get their hands on it. That means you don't give it to them. It means you don't leave it where they can get hold of it. And this bill basically wanted to say that if it wasn't held on, we got it changed slightly, because one of the things was the bill started out as being you had to lock your gun up when it was in the house. That didn't allow, of course, for the person to have it in their direct possession while they're in the home. And if it's in their holster or in their purse, or they're actually controlling that gun, then that should be okay. So we got that changed. And then the next change that was made, which I was very concerned about, was that an additional amendment was put in to say that the civil penalty of $500 would only be assessed against the gun owner if the gun was used in a crime, to commit a crime. Well, my immediate reaction to that was, what would happen if the crime was to shoot the gun owner? You were then going to charge the estate of the dead gun owner $500 for this person. So luckily the committee intervened and added language which says, unless of course the crime was committed against the gun owner. So.
And that passed 12-9?
It did. It passed 12-9 with those amendments, and we'll see. I think that's a good sign. I think
we still need better laws with regard to safe storage, wouldn't you say?
Yes, we definitely do. Obviously, with a gun owner who's a responsible gun owner shouldn't need to be told to be responsible. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who don't want to be responsible, and there's got to be some policing of their responsibility. If everybody did it properly and put the gun, when they haven't got it in their hand or on their body, put it somewhere safe, keep it away from children, then there wouldn't be need for this law. But that's not happening. We know that there are many homes, especially where there are children present, where the guns are not locked away when they're not in use or not being carried. And this is just another version of that. If you're with a child or with someone who's prohibited from using it, then you've got to take care of that gun. Guns are not, it's not like a salt shaker or something that, it doesn't matter whether it's on the coffee table or on the kitchen or in your bedside drawer or something. It is a deadly weapon, and it's deadly all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right. 52 weeks of the year. So you can't just say, well, while I've got it in my hand, I'm okay, but when I want to put it down, it's still a deadly weapon. So people should be more responsible with these.
I've mentioned before that I'm very impressed by Ethan's law that was passed in Connecticut. Will hold accountable people if they have guns in their home and they even if they're not loaded, if bullets in the gun are available and they're used improperly and harm someone, the owner will be held accountable. But we really need to go even beyond that. We need to go to a place where we can prevent harm, not just properly penalize people after the fact. So,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is one of those things which, public PSAs would help. There's just been a fantastic PSA produced by States United, which is the umbrella group for gun violence prevention organizations. They produced an incredible video, which is age limited to 18 and above, but it's on YouTube. And it's basically a young child who makes a video of himself opening a box. And it's not a toy box. It's a box from his dad's closet or somewhere, and it's to show the gun.
Right.
And it goes through the whole thing of the kid pulling the gun out, showing it and saying, oh, look at this gun. Isn't it neat? This is where you pull the trigger. This is where you put the bullets. This is what a bullet looks like. And right at the end, he pulls back the slide and says, oh, I think it's jammed. And he puts his finger into the slide to push the jammed bullet down while the gun is pointing at him. The movie stops at that point.
Yeah.
But your imagination goes beyond there. We know what happens next.
Right.
And then it goes and gives statistics, and it's just a very powerful PSA. Those are the kind of things that need to get out there and be put on national TV.
Well, I'll post that on the Safer Country Facebook page.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, it's excellent. Absolutely excellent. It's one of those things that hits you very hard. There's no violence. There's no sign of blood or anything. It's just, they take you to a point where you know what happens next.
Of course, we also have to worry about the thoughtlessness of people who might put a gun on the top of a refrigerator thinking the child can't get up there to get it because he just wants to set it down for a moment. And then he forgets and goes to watch TV and something happens. Leaving guns about or handing them to the wrong people who are not responsible to take care of them while you're doing something else. There are many ways that these guns can be fall into the wrong hands. And public awareness campaign would be an exceptional idea. And once again, that gets to the part that we need a government who's going to help fund these kind of projects to try to help reduce gun violence. And we need to do more in that respect.
I think then the number of guns that are discovered at airports is an example of, people say, well, I didn't realize I had it with me. Well, the idea of having a gun is to protect yourself. If you don't know you have it with you, what kind of protection is that offering? And it's just an example to me of how guns have become so ubiquitous to people's lives that they can forget that they've got it. That's just unbelievable to me.
Yes, it's hard to comprehend, and yet we have a story not that long ago of a fella who drove into the security zone in Washington with a gun, with a large supply of ammunition. And he was there, he claimed to be for security. He didn't have the right ID. They arrested him. And he said, well, I forgot the ammunition was in the vehicle. I forgot the gun was in the vehicle. He wasn't there to be an armed security person. He claimed he was there to be an unarmed security person for some job. He didn't have any ID for that. But his answer is, his excuse is remarkable. I forgot.
Yeah. I never forget that I have a car in my garage and go walking to some place instead because I forgot I have a car in my garage. It's like,
yeah. Well, all right. So let's move on. But
yeah. Moving right along.
We have the very interesting gang bill.
Yeah.
That HB 2231 by Todd Gilbert. Tell us about that bill and where it stands and what our concerns are about that bill, because that bill has a little bit of support out there, and it's
it's the first thing I'll say about the bill is we have a saying in England, it's like the curate's egg, it's good in parts. I like the part about getting gang members, putting a fund out there to assist gang members to leave it, exit gangs, have their tats removed, and that kind of thing. Find employment and get them out of the gang life and back into the regular mainstream society. I support that idea. I also support the idea that a very powerful Republican in the House is finally agreeing to do something about gun violence. Now, the place we sort of diverge a little bit is concentrating very heavily on the gang issue. Gang violence is important. It's very, you know, it should be dealt with, but it's not the answer to gun violence. It's an aspect of it. But having said that, the fact that Delegate Gilbert has put his toe in the water here and put forward something to attack one part of gun violence, I think that's noticeable. And you know, I'd like to see him then consider the other aspects of gun violence and what could be done. One of the things we don't like about it is it appears that some of the interventions that are also required could well become heavy-handed police interventions, and I don't think we need to encourage that. We already have experiences of situations where you know, the broken windows thing in New York, I forget what they called it, where police have overreacted to you know, and created more of a problem than they've helped solve.
Well,
So
many people are concerned about, you know, the impact of the 1994 federal crime bill, which increased arrests and put more people in prison. And so they're worried about the unintended consequences. Also, there's some discussion about what constitutes a gang. And talk
I'm
about
glad
that for a minute.
I'm glad you brought that up, because in my mind, the group of armed people meeting in a field in Bedford County, wearing remnants of types of uniforms and carrying all kinds of different weaponry, looked to me very much like a gang. They called themselves a militia, which of course they're not allowed to do because they're not under the control of the civil authority. But if that's a gang too, then yeah, let's have a go at doing something about that.
If the drug gangs start calling themselves militia, then what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the blood militia.
Really need to redefine these terms and think about if the focus of the legislator is only on African Americans or Black people or other minorities, because he's afraid of minorities with guns, that's, you know, that's an issue we have to address.
Yeah, which is why I say it's good in parts. I believe Delegate Gilbert is really sincere in wanting to do something about the violent aspect of it. I just wish he would be just as sincere about other aspects of gun violence.
What other bills are on your plate that you're happy to see?
That one's gone to appropriations. I believe there's a very substantial fiscal impact. I'm not sure under the current circumstances whether that will get sufficient funding to implement. If they could fund only part of it, I'd like to see them fund the exit from the gangs, and then think about the other part later.
Are we bereft, by the way, of any laws that are aimed to try to reduce drug gang violence in the state?
No, there are a number of avenues that could be used, I believe, in existing law. But again, it all boils down to are the same standards being applied to behavior by all groups? And that I think is critical. If a law does discriminate against a person based upon their ethnicity or their locality or what have you, and that the same actions by someone else somewhere else would not receive the same response, then there's something wrong. It's not necessarily that the law is wrong, but the implementation is wrong, and then we need, better control of how DCGS gives instructions to police forces and stuff like that.
So we've seen a lot of the worst bills either disappear for the moment or disappear entirely, and all that is good. But of the bills we haven't discussed today, what's the one that you're most pleased to see moving through the process and hopefully will become law? Anything else on your plate?
Other than the two, the misdemeanor assault and battery, and the guns in public places, in government buildings and Capitol Square, there's a very interesting gun by a bill by Marcus Simon, House Bill 2276, which is the ghost gun bill. People who have not kept their ear to the ground on what's happening in other states, for instance, might not know much about ghost guns. This is a gun which has no serial number and is therefore untraceable. And often these now are being, at one point there were a very tiny number of guns that were being smuggled out of manufacturers prior to getting serial numbers. And that was a known thing at one point, but it was a tiny, tiny number. But now these things are showing up more and more. I mean, in DC, for instance, they went from, I think it was 6 in a year to 20 some odd in a year, and then to, I think, over 100 in several months. Because they are, the utility of a gun with no serial number is that you cannot be traced back to the person who possessed it.
How many of those guns have been associated with crimes that we're aware of? Do we have?
Well, I mean, California, it's the percentage of crime guns that are now coming unserialized is increasing. I haven't got the numbers in front of me, but it's raised awareness in California that this is now becoming a problem. California, of course, has got incredibly strong laws. However, they don't have the moat. They have. If the crime guns in California are from Arizona and other neighboring states, but now they can have people in California building guns from parts, and then not requiring them to go and get a serial number before they can use the gun. It's one of those things which terrible things happen, and then the laws are put in place. We don't need to let this become a terrible thing before we put the law into place. This is intervention earlier on, perhaps, than we've done on a number of other issues. But it's about time we looked at how easy it is to buy an unserialized receiver, which they say is not, or a frame for a handgun that is not serialized, and to make that into a gun. It is not rocket science. It really isn't. You can buy the parts you need. You can buy the tools you need, and you don't need a CNC milling machine to file off a little piece of metal that was left behind in the manufacturing process, or to drill a hole when they will sell you also the plastic template that shows you exactly where to drill the hole and creates, guides the drill into the hole.
Well, of course, I agree. So the question is there someone who disagrees? And who is trying to, is there anyone trying to stop this bill from going through?
Oh, yeah. The gun lobby is appalled at it. They think it should be, it's been according to the National Rifle Association, this manufacturing your own guns has been around since, people made guns. People started using guns. Well, there's a difference between taking a hunk of steel and pieces of wood and putting it all together, and making it and milling it and boring it and doing everything to make the individual components, and buying one which is basically an erector set that you just need to do a tiny little bit of work on one part and then just assemble the other parts. It's not like a Lego kit, right, that makes a gun.
So this effort with ghost guns is basically one way to get around the background check system. But the NRA actually supports putting names in the system. They just don't like the idea of a universal background check law to actually make the system work.
Yeah.
Rather,
well, sometimes they support things in principle, while simultaneously trying to defeat them in practice.
Well, what do you think the prospects of this bill getting through are? It sounds like a very important bill.
I think it's it was 52 to 48 on the House floor, which is a bit of a squeaker. So it could be a squeaker as well in the Senate. It all depends on one or two Democratic senators who have tendencies to lean towards being lenient on gun legislation, shall we say?
So should we be alerting people about this, maybe one or two key bills that they should be contacting their senators about to ask them to firm their backs and support these pieces of legislation?
I believe so. Anything that gets through the House and goes to the Senate, which will, pretty much every, I think it's 8 of the 9 will go to judiciary. So there are a couple of people on the judiciary in the Senate that need to be reminded, especially from Northern Virginia, Chap Peterson. We have Linwood Lewis, and Senator Deeds sometimes is a little bit squiffy on gun stuff. Well, of course, anybody who's on that Senate Judiciary Committee, pro or GOP or Democrat, needs to be contacted, especially if it's by constituents.
All right. Well, we've reached our end point once again, and but I think it's been fascinating and well worth the hour. I hope those who watch this feel the same way. We'll tune in next week. Will we be back? I hope to our regular time of 1 p.m. 1 to 2. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend and congratulations, kudos on 40 years. Your 40th anniversary, wedding anniversary is soon, and I hope you're going to have a great weekend to celebrate that.
Best move I ever made in my life.
Clearly. That's marvelous news. And so with that, let me say, be safe, be well to all. And hopefully, as I say, you'll tune in next Friday at 1 o'clock. Every Friday at 1 o'clock, while the session's going, Andy and I will continue to talk about the progress of these laws and what we need to do to make our state and even nation safer. Thanks so much. And
thank you.
have a great day, Andy. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.